Good evening, fellow Democrats. My name is Constantine Anthony. I am the chair of the California Democratic Party's Disabilities Caucus. And tomorrow, December 3rd, is the official United Nations International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And so today I'm here this evening to welcome you to a wonderful, lively discussion with a lot of panelists who are very much involved in the disability rights movement. And we are very excited to have them here tonight. We're going to go one by one through everyone who's going to be here, talk about what they've done, talk about some of the things that we're working on now. But before we get started, just a little bit of background so everyone knows we're all on the same page. The International Day of Persons with Disabilities has pretty much been the way it is now since about 1992, even though earlier in the 70s, the UN proclaimed a year of persons with disabilities, and that proclamation came a few years before the official year of 1981 as the year of persons with disabilities. And it sort of blossomed from there. We had the decade of persons with disabilities from 1983 to 1992. And since 1992, every year on December 3rd has been this great celebration, inclusion, and for us, it's been a real point of remembering and sort of reflecting on the years past. Every year for the last about 20 years, the UN has added a theme to each day of persons with disabilities. And the 2021 theme, I'm reading from their website, is Leadership and Participation of Persons with Disabilities toward an Inclusive, Accessible, and Sustainable Post-COVID-19 World, which is really great for us today because we're going to talk about leadership and participation of persons with disabilities and as it pertains to California and the California Democratic Party and all of those processes. And I'm very excited to have all of the panelists that are here today. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I was elected chair of the California Democratic Party Disabilities Caucus back in June. It was my first time in any leadership position at the state level for the party, and I'm very excited to work with all of my fellow caucus members and the other leadership members of the party. And that leads me directly into our first panelist, who is the current vice chair, my good friend, Sasha Bittner, who has worked for many years as a disability advocate. I'll read directly from her bio. She's been a CADEM delegate since 2017. She served on various boards, including the San Francisco Disability and Aging Commission as a Mayor Breed appointee. In her delegate role, she is the vice chair of the Disabilities Caucus, as well as the co-chair of the California Democratic Legislative Committee. So thank you, Sasha, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for having me.
I wanted to pose the first question to you before we bring everybody else on. You did a lot of work in your youth with ADAPT and other disability activist organizations sort of outside of the Democratic Party. So I want to ask you, how does your independent activism, especially from your early days, really connect to the work that you're doing now within the party?
It is very much connected.
It is very much connected.
We elect has a very direct impact.
Who we elect has a very direct impact
on the type of policies we can achieve.
On the type of policies we can achieve.
Although I believe in both inside and outside activism.
Also, I believe in both inside and outside activism.
And doing a combination of both partisan and non-partisan work allows me to more effectively advocate for policies I want.
And doing a combination of both partisan and nonpartisan work allows me to do that more effectively.
Yeah, I can understand that. There's a lot of work that needs to be done that maybe isn't necessarily tied with partisan politics. And yeah, everything that you're doing now is just super fantastic. You're like a superwoman right now, doing everything. So thank you for being here. I wanted to move on to another one of the executive board members for the Disabilities Caucus. We have with us Jennifer Kumiyama, who was born with arthrogryposis and uses a wheelchair daily. She was appointed by Mayor Robert Garcia to the Long Beach Transit Board of Directors and served under former Councilwoman Lena Gonzalez as her special projects manager until June of 2020. Jennifer is currently the client services manager at Progressive Solutions Consulting Campaigns, a firm that works to elect women of color, LGBTQ candidates, and candidates with disabilities to office. Thank you for being here, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me, Constantine.
How are you today?
Good, how are you?
Good, good.
Good.
I wanted to pose the next question to you. What is the importance of visibility and representation in politics and media with regards to disability rights?
Well, I think it's really important that we all see ourselves in the people who represent us in all areas of life. Seeing ourselves empowers our future to be a part of society and to feel like it's okay to have a disability. Growing up in the 80s, I never saw anybody like me in politics or in the media. And that really does a number on a young mind. I struggled so much in college with what my future would look like or what I would be. And it told me that I wasn't worthy of being represented. While I made my own moves and reached my own personal goals, saying that it was more difficult than it needed to be for me is really an understatement. Now with more and more representation in the media and in politics, the disability community is really mobilizing, and we're finally being seen by society in most spaces. There is still a very long way for our community to go before our community is visible in an equitable way, but I truly feel like more people hear us when we speak, and they see us when we ask to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for being here. And we have with us as well, Stephen Auclair, a member of the disability community. Stephen serves as the state lead co-chair of the Justice, Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion Committee for the California Democratic Party. He also serves as the chair of the Ventura County Democratic Party and in leadership with Greater Oxnard Democrats and the Stonewall Democrats of Ventura County. Professionally, Stephen serves in the government as Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator for the County of Ventura. Welcome, Stephen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I wanted to pose another question to you. How does intersectionality play a role in modern disability rights legislation?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think increasingly so, especially in recent years, having a conversation around the percentage of Americans that will become disabled in their lifetime or become a person with a disability or be related to a person with a disability. So seeing these issues as intimately connected, not just as there's disability issues and then there's issues for people of color and then there's issues for elders, but seeing these issues as connected. And I really believe in universal design as a public policy standpoint, and that is when you go in and you design a policy or you design a building, anticipate the needs that everyone has, not just as a reactionary to perhaps the ADA requires us to do this, therefore we're going to do the bare minimum, but looking at the intersection within our community and planning in a universal way for our residents.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. A little bit later, we're going to have Assemblymember Ting. Phil Ting is going to be joining us. But until then, we're going to do a little bit of a panel discussion with the three folks we have here now. I've asked about activism, representation, intersectionality. Why am I asking about these things on today's celebration for the International Day of Disabilities? Well, you know, the UN this year is talking about leadership and participation of persons with disabilities toward an inclusive, accessible, and sustainable post-COVID-19 world. These are the things that really bring us together. These are the points that really promote that type of leadership. So me personally, you know, I'm the first ever openly autistic elected official in the history of California. And once I won my election last year to the Burbank City Council, people from all over the state ended up contacting me and thanking me for, going forward and doing that and getting elected, even with, to some people it was in spite of my disability. And I try to explain to them, it was because of my disability that I got involved in politics. And I'm sure many of us here have that same reasoning. And so I wanted to move on to, where we talk about the politics and where we move forward with our politics. I'm going to ask a specific question to each one of the panelists, but if any of you have anything to interject or want to add anything, please chime in. So the first question will go to Sasha. Reflecting on your early activism, how do we get more disabled Californians engaged in the political process, especially within the Democratic Party?
And the bit funny. Because my mom always thought I would enjoy being involved in the Democratic Party.
Because my mom always thought I would enjoy being involved in the Democratic Party.
She knows me way too well.
She knows me way too well.
But I think for a long time, I didn't consider it real activism.
But I think for a long time, I didn't consider it real
It
activism.
was only after the 2016 election that I reconsidered.
It was only after the 2016 election that I reconsidered.
And it was because I was concerned about voting rights in general.
Because I was concerned about voting rights in general.
I think the party highlighting disability issues.
I think the party highlighting disability issues.
And as Stephen said, every issue is a disability issue.
And as Stephen said, every issue is a disability issue.
And voting blue affects policy is critical.
And how voting blue affects policy is critical.
Also, having disabled people in positions of power.
Also, having disabled people in positions of power.
Like the co-chairs on committees.
Like as co-chairs on committees.
As a member of a county central committee.
As a member of a county central committee.
Makes so much difference in perception.
Makes so much difference in perceptions.
Both for disabled people and for other people.
Both for disabled people and other people.
Also use us as ambassadors.
Also use us as ambassadors.
And listen to us when we do have suggestions or concerns.
And do listen to us when we have suggestions and concerns.
Yeah, I remember in 2016, Hillary Clinton was the first presidential candidate who even had a disability plank on her campaign platform. That was revolutionary. And then 4 years later, all of the top candidates had one. And so, moving that forward and taking that forward really affected a lot of, I didn't run until after 2016 as well. It was a big change, I have another question here, follow up to Jennifer. Obviously, other than the amazing folks on this panel, who do you feel out there is doing this correctly? Which individuals or organizations do you see leading the way on disability rights?
Well, there's quite a few organizations, but when I think about individuals who are really pounding the pavement in their hometowns, even nationally, and are very loud and make a lot of noise on social media, I think of Brittany Wilson, who is an amazing Black disabled woman. We actually have the same disability of arthrogryposis. She's an activist, a model, and a campaigner, and She uses her platform to discuss and dissect important disabled rights discussions in current affairs. A key topic she's engaged with, other than disabled rights, is disability policy, Black disabled history, disability and employability, and normalizing disabled bodies. Another advocate that I think is really amazing, a lot of you might know her, Alice Wong, who's based in San Francisco, is perhaps the best known for launching the Disability Visibility Project, which is an online community that amplifies disability media and culture. It really began as a partnership with StoryCorps that gives disabled people the opportunity to record their own oral histories, which is super important. And the project is now going on its 7th year of existence. She's also published 2 anthologies featuring dozens of essays written by people with disabilities. And she's a co-partner with #CryptTheVote, which is a nonpartisan online movement that engages disabled people in politics and policymaking, which is super important.
Yes, that absolutely. Brittany and Alice are both really great. Would you mind, Jennifer, putting their names in the chat real quick, just so people can look them up?
Absolutely. You can find them on Instagram, and I put both of their handles in the chat right now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I do see that the Honorable Assembly Member has joined us. Phil Ting is on. Hello, Assembly Member. How are you?
I'm doing great, Constantine. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. I know we only have you for a little bit, so I wanted to get some questions into you. You were elected in the State Assembly in 2012. You're in the 19th Assembly District. That's basically west side of San Francisco, Daly City. I used to live in Daly City, and South San Francisco. And I wanted to ask, okay, so you now serve as the chair of the Assembly Budget Committee. So my question to you, what were the biggest accomplishments this year legislatively in California for disability rights, both in terms of actual legislation, but also in our budget?
Yeah, I'm going to focus much more on the budget, because this was really an incredible budget year. There's been a lot of things that we as a community have been advocating for frankly, for years and years. And so it was a huge win. Many of these issues, we would have just celebrated having one of these big wins, but having such a huge year last year, we had an $80 billion surplus. Our budget now, our general fund now is almost $200 billion, which I'll just contrast. When I came in 2012, our budget was about $100 million. So it's almost doubled, which is quite significant. So we spent $1.3 billion to expand Medi-Cal eligibility to all eligible Californians 50 and older. We eliminated this very awful Medi-Cal asset test for seniors to remove senior savings, because oftentimes seniors, if they had a few dollars in their account, they sometimes weren't allowed to get Medi-Cal. We increased SSI, the SSI SSP grant, through a $675 million appropriation over the next 2 fiscal years to restore the 50% of the 50% cut, which remained from 2009. So we were still undoing cuts from the Great Recession. So when people talk about these cuts that were, 10 years ago, most of us had long gone over. So basically, it was long overdue that we really have those cuts restored. We also ended, there was a potential suspension of in-home support services down the road, 7% cut to in-home support services. So that was restored as well. Huge victory was $1.2 billion, something we've been advocating for years, $1.2 billion for provider increases for the DD centers for over a 5-year period. That was just a huge win. We had that great rate study, which we had all advocated for, but in particular, the disabled community had advocated for, demonstrated that we were, $1.2 billion short. And for everybody who goes to a center or needs assistance, it's not news. It's definitely not news. That pain has been felt in the community. And so long overdue, we were so excited to get this huge commitment over the next 5 years to do that provider rate increase. Really big win, but really without everyone's advocacy on this Zoom wouldn't have happened. I mean, without the community's dogged advocacy, that would not have happened. Some of the smaller wins, which are still very, very important, we restored recreation, camping, educational services, and non-medical therapies for persons served by DDS with $19 million this next coming year. It's a small amount of money, but it goes a long way for folks that really don't get those kind of opportunities. $10 million ongoing to support language access and cultural competency in regional centers. That's a major issue because a lot of times, folks with limited language abilities have a difficult time accessing services. $550 million one time to help students with disabilities recover from COVID school disruptions. And that could be spent a number of different ways. It could be for learning support, could be for alternative dispute resolution practices. It could be just engaging with families, whole variety of proposals. So like I said, any 1 year, one of these probably would have been just major victories. But the fact that I get to rattle these things off like they're nothing, where these were years in the making. I mean, these were things that we were talking about long before I got to the legislature in 2012, because I know people were talking about these to me when it was the day I got to Sacramento. And the fact that we were able to restore many of these cuts, I think it speaks to how incredible the advocacy is of this community and how important it is to have that voice in Sacramento. Because without that voice, we couldn't do it, even if we wanted to. It really requires your advocacy for, talking to legislators, talking to the governor's office, making sure you make that point, being active in the party, which is what we're here doing tonight. And so that is so, all of it's important. None of it's not important. So I just really wanted to make sure I was here tonight just to say thank you. Thank you so much for all the hard work and all that advocacy for the last, for the last number of years.
Yeah, and thank you for being here. Yeah, and I cannot reiterate enough. Any one of those that you listed off like 8, 9, 10, 11, any one of those in a single year would have been considered a huge win. So this really a bunch of stuff came through, and that's just budgetary allocation. I just want to tack on a few extra wins. We had AB 1194 got signed by the governor, which changes the way we do conservatorships in California. If anyone has been following the Britney Spears movement and all that, a huge change for advocacy for people in conservatorship. We also have now a 5-year dwindled down program for the sub-minimum wage. That was a huge win in California. We're now one of, I believe, only 14 or 15 states that are now, getting rid of the sub-minimum wage for people with disabilities. So people get paid, a real living wage. I mean, there's just so many to list. It's been an incredible year. So thank you for being here with us. I know we have you for a few more minutes. I wanted to ask you, what effective methods, you've been in this for a while, what effective methods have you seen from disability advocates to get their message to legislators? And then conversely, what can legislative allies do to better engage with the disability community?
Yeah, everything in a political environment is really about relationships, and relationships don't happen overnight. Relationships also don't happen because everybody woke up one day and decided to show up and do something. It's showing up every year, showing up and knowing that this is important, demonstrating that it's important, making sure that there are human faces to these stories. Quite often, I rattled off a whole bunch of numbers, and I constantly remind my budget staff, it's like we talk about these numbers, but the numbers are about making sure that we made a difference to the 40 million Californians who are asking us to do this work. And so if we don't make a difference in people's lives, then we failed, no matter how much money we spent. So it's a constant reminder that when you're doing your advocacy, it's about human beings, right? It's about having that human touch and telling your stories, why this is important, why this is as important as some other issue. And I hate to say more important because it's not more important than many other issues. But quite often when you're doing budgets, you have to make those types of choices. And so, we had the Lanterman Act. We know that those were promises that were made and we needed to keep those promises. So having a community that said, hey, this is a promise that was made, and this is the law. We're not talking about some sort of, nice resolution you just said would be nice to do. This is the law, and this is what the law says should be done. And reminding the state, reminding local governments, hey, this is what is supposed to happen. And frankly, not being shy. So showing up regularly, talking to your legislators. I always say for folks who can't get up to Sacramento, don't worry. We all go home all the time, and I'm home in the fall. And so it's a great time to be talking to your legislators when we're not in Sacramento, when we're home, because oftentimes we're more relaxed. Oftentimes we're more able to meet with people, have a longer conversation. And I think the other part is just to consistently know what you would like to ask for. I think, we talked about all these things, and these are issues. The reason I know to talk about these issues tonight is these are things that, these are issues that have been brought forward by advocates. These have been priorities. Having similar priorities year after year really helps, because then we feel like, hey, we're making progress, or we're not jumping around from one place to another, but that we really are able to support and understand the agenda, but stand side by side and fight together on this agenda. This is a joint victory. This is not your victory. It's not my victory. This is our victory that we have been fighting for years.
Yeah, absolutely. Before you have to go, I want to pose one last question. Any predictions for any disability legislation coming up in 2022? Something you see on the horizon?
Yeah, I think last year, like we talked about, were so many huge wins. I think what we want to make sure is that money gets out the door and to the right people, into the right places. And so I think that's where you all could help me is, hey, we heard about this cut that, wasn't done, but how come I'm not seeing the restoration of my services? Or how come I can't get into my regional center? Or how come I'm not able to get served in Spanish or Chinese or Vietnamese or Korean? I mean, hearing about how this is going is very important, because we want to make sure that, again, it's not that money's being spent. We want to make sure people are getting help. That's the bottom line. But we don't really know that unless you tell us, hey, the good and the bad. Oftentimes we never hear if it's good. So in some ways we have to assume if we don't hear anything, it's okay. So oftentimes we hear things because it's bad, but that's okay. I mean, that's our job you let us know when things aren't working, because it's our job to, serve the people and to go try and to do our best to go fix those things. And so, really, these were huge wins that we've been fighting for a while. Let's make sure they're done right. Let's make sure that the people who need it the most are getting the help they need, and that is really what the community can do most. Thank you, Assembly Member. I appreciate you being here. If you want to stick around and chime in on any of the other questions, feel free to hang out. I appreciate it. I apologize, but I do have to run. It was so great to see everybody. Good to see you, Constantine. Hi to Sasha as well, and everybody else. Just a huge shout out. Thanks so much for being here tonight. Thank you. Appreciate it. I wanted to move back to our panelists. Stephen, I wanted to pose the next question to you. What are the biggest hurdles right now facing forward momentum on disability rights legislation? We know we've got a lot done in the last year, but what do we see are the problems impeding more movement?
One of the things I thought about in the last few days is we have seen a historic investment by the federal government and the state government and monies that enter into our communities, right? The Recovery Act, the various emergency grants to the cities, and now those cities and entities will need to be making those investments. And so one of the challenges I think our community faces is being at the table and knowing to engage and say, hey, the ADA was great, we celebrate it every day, but here's a historic opportunity to make right some of these delayed investments. We all know that civic building that's a little long in the tooth that they've delayed doing more than just the bare minimum ADA compliance. So looking at those buildings, looking at those infrastructure projects, looking at the software programs that they're going to be buying, all of those little things that those investments are being made right now at your city council level or school board level. And we're talking hundreds, in some cases, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, sometimes multi-million dollars investments in a city like mine. And being able to say, these are disability issues. When you go and you're approving your parks master plan and you're going to buy this wish list supplies for your parks, now is the time to do it. You know, here's an example. In my city, we have a big park that's along our beach. And just last year, they had talked about putting in benches, but where they were going to put in the benches weren't wheelchair accessible. You would have to go up a little bit of a slope in a grassy area. And so really it's like, okay, this is in that case 2020, now it's 2021. We're going to make this investment that's going to last for 20 years. And we're not using universal design. So to make that long story short is keep in mind that there's historic investment decisions happening right now at the local levels. You have cities like one near mine, which was just considering closing a library 2 years ago to save $30,000, now having to decide what to do with tens of millions of extra dollars. And so being at part of that conversation, I think is a hurdle, but we need to be there and we need to speak up.
Yeah. I wanted to ask that question to both Sasha and Jennifer as well. I mean, personally, for you guys, how is it? How does it impede getting engaged with the community? I mean, what hurdles do you guys see?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, what are the hurdles, the biggest hurdles facing forward momentum on disability rights legislation?
I think for me, one of the issues.
I think for me, one of the issues
is that people sometimes still think of it as a need.
That people sometimes still think of it as a need.
A need. Like as an issue that doesn't affect very many people.
As an issue that doesn't affect that many people.
And it's like, oh, these poor disabled people.
I'm thinking like these poor disabled people.
You know, something like that. Whereas, as we know, every issue has a disability component.
And as we know, every issue has a disability component.
Like right now I'm missing a local meeting.
Like right now I'm missing a local meeting.
About transportation.
About transportation.
You know, San Francisco Public Transit.
For San Francisco Public Transit.
And they wanted to array with some of the wonderful major transit lines.
They wanted to
do
away with some of the major transit lines.
And that's not only going to have an effect, and going to have even more of an effect on those with disabilities.
And it's going to have even more of an effect on those with disabilities.
And so stuff like that, well, you know, I mean, I think we're about 20% of the population.
I think we're about 20% of the population.
And people don't seem to realize that at times.
And people don't seem to realize that at times.
I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, San Francisco is considered a very progressive area and heavily Democratic, and yet we're still having those issues in those places.
Yeah, well, I mean, the San Francisco public transit agency has many issues about.
Well, I think the San Francisco Public Transit Authority has many issues.
You know, so it's not, anyway, yeah.
Jennifer, what about you? Do you see any hurdles? What's the biggest stuff preventing movement?
I would have to agree with Sasha. I think the biggest hurdle is the misconception that you're born with a disability, or that just because you were born without one, that you won't acquire one later on down the line. As we age, as people are born, as people get into accidents, unfortunately, so on and so forth, our population is the only population that anyone can become a part of at any time. So I think if we change the way that we think about disability, and like Sasha said, looking at it less as being less of a need and more of just how we are, then I think things will start to open up and be more universal. Like Stephen said, people will start to think about how we design, you know, our homes, how we design our schools, our parks, and so on and so forth, and jobs. I think, you know, if COVID did anything good, I think that it really gave the disability community recognition as far as being able to work from home. It's and how valuable we are to society. And in addition to that, with all the budget cuts our population always gets threatened with, I wish people would really think and understand what the cost of having a disability really is. And how much a lot of people with disabilities do without simply because of the cost. So I think those are some of the hurdles.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Sasha, I wanted to go back to you real quick. We're talking about the hurdles that are happening in disability rights movement, but what about the party? What can the Democratic Party here in California really do to make our political processes and volunteering more accessible?
I think I use a few for those disabled people who may want to become delegates at cost.
I think a huge issue for those disabled people who may want to be delegates is cost.
I am very lucky to have family support in this area.
I'm very lucky to have family support in this area.
But so many people don't.
But so many people don't.
I'm not sure how to address that.
I'm not sure how to address that.
But that does need to be addressed, as most people still live in, disabled people still live in poverty.
But that does need to be addressed, as most disabled people still live in poverty.
Although I love in-person conventions and e-boards.
I love in-person conventions and e-boards.
But to get more people, disabled people involved.
But to get more disabled people involved.
A hybrid model, I think, would be best.
A hybrid model, I think, would be best.
Both cost-wise.
Both cost-wise.
But also right now due to health concerns.
And also right now due to health concerns.
I think in a broader sense, being different types of activism could also be good.
I think in a broader sense, different types of activism could also be good.
I know doing campaigns, highlights phone banking and door knocking.
I know during campaigns, the party highlights phone banking and door knocking.
But some people like me can only do texting.
But some people like me can only do texting.
And that is a really good way to be an activist too.
And that's a really good way to be an activist too.
And also like on a even broader level, we need to work to change laws.
And on a broader level, we need to change laws.
And for example, if I wanted to run for something.
If, for example, if I wanted to run for something.
I could be on Medicaid or on government paid for home care.
I couldn't be on Medicaid or on government paid for home care.
That is going to be a huge barrier for people.
That's going to be a huge barrier for people.
And we need more people with disabilities in the party.
And we need more people with disabilities in the party.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of that is not just, accessibility issues, but financial issues and making allowances for that in the party that's a huge component. I actually wanted to ask that question to Jennifer and Stephen as well. Jennifer, do you see anything tangible that the party can do here at the state level to really engage folks with disabilities?
The party has access to an entire caucus with people with all sorts of disabilities, and that's us.
Hey, there we are.
I know. Hi. I think strengthening that partnership and really addressing the needs to view them as something that is necessary for people to participate versus it being a cost is really something that I think the party can work on. But most importantly, I think, reach out to us. That's what we're here for. Use us. That's why we're here. We're here to make, our state party more accessible to people, not just within the party, but to gain more, more participation within our caucus and things of that nature. So I think that would be something that the party could really work on. And I would love to see that come to fruition.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephen, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think there's sort of two things, both what Sasha and Jennifer have mentioned about actually looking at the systems we have in place and the positive lessons we've learned during the COVID period, whether it be the unprecedented participation during the all vote by mail ADEM elections. There had been discussion about a drive-through ADEM option. All of these different options for more and more people to get engaged. I know on my central committee, we have about 130-ish members when you include the alternates. And so that participation has been higher than we've had in person because they don't all have to commute to the same location. They can pop on. And by lowering that barrier to entry is going to help everybody, including persons with disabilities and just a wide variety of people. So I think being focused on that, I think also encouraging our fellow persons with disabilities to be, as a program I was involved in as a youth, disabled and proud, right? And speaking about your disability, because many of us are in leadership, we're in different groups, we're at different tables, and including our lived experiences in those conversations is really going to encourage others to come along, right? So it's not just about advancing current policy, but having people be able to look at our caucuses, our standing committees, our clubs, our county committees, and seeing persons with disabilities at all levels of those organizations. And as Sasha was saying, even looking at our volunteer opportunities, years ago, it's kind of like, unless you could canvas or phone bank, you're like dead to me as a volunteer. But now we have a wide variety of options. So I know one of the things I talk to my volunteers about is being mindful that I know everybody wants to do texting, but there's some people that is the best way that they can contribute for a variety of reasons. So if you can go do something else, leave that as an opportunity for those who aren't able to contribute in those other ways, right? So being mindful, even when we do volunteer tasks and how we're going to manage voter outreach even. So those are things I would say, systematically among people with disabilities, so showing pride and being outspoken about our experiences at all levels. And then also on the candidates we support and the coordinated campaigns we run, that we always have opportunities for people, regardless of ability, to contribute to our causes.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate something you said about the mail-in ballots. I know COVID has really shone a light on the accessibility issues across the country, but really highlighting how much disability participation we've had over the last year, because the state legislator and the governor and everyone has had to really think about, well, how do we take care of people who are immunocompromised, keep people safe? And it's stuff that we've been shouting about for years. So finally, we have, people figuring that out and getting on board with that.
One, to your point as well, you think about, certainly you could speak to this from a candidate's perspective, is again, years ago, based on your ability to go and knock on doors, that's the way you could campaign. where now we have other opportunities for our candidates to be able to engage and also give their volunteers the ability, right? So if you're not able to go up those flights of stairs to go and knock on doors, prioritizing that for the candidate, for the volunteers. Let's say you have like 5 volunteers. I know we like to act like everybody has like 400 volunteers, but you're 5 solid volunteers, 10 solid volunteers. They can be doing that while as the candidate, you could literally be texting often your entire universe of people if it's a small district and having those one-on-one conversations.
Yeah.
And so that opens up pathways for people with disabilities to engage voters in ways that they hadn't before.
Yeah, and I will say, as someone who ran for office and won during the summer of 2020, that campaign was completely unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. It was phone calls, it was texting, it was email. It was very different because I'm used to knocking on doors, and none of that was happening. And so, yeah, just COVID has really, really changed the way the rest of the folks involved in politics have seen it, because we've already seen it. We knew that. We've known it for years. I'm just glad that it's finally being talked about. Jennifer, I want to do a follow-up question with you. What organizations or demographics should disabled activists be engaging with to strengthen our movement within the party? Who are we reaching out to?
Parents of children with disabilities, schools, all of our young people. I remember being a younger person before I ever became an advocate and thinking, I don't think that I contribute very much, or that I could ever contribute so much. But, I think it's important for us to build a better foundation by training our young people and, our parents of young people with disabilities by making, space for them and ensuring that people, not only legislatively, but even in the media, that we deserve to be represented. And also, I know you asked me a question earlier about other organizations, and I just literally put them in the chat right now. I work really closely. Some of the organizations that people should be following is United Spinal, the ARC, Easter Seals. The CFILC does great work on letting people know what important legislation is coming up and what we need to advocate for. And Hand in Hand, which is an organization that I just learned about when advocating for the Better Jobs, Better Care Act. Things like that. I also think joining this caucus. I know I've seen in the chat there's a lot of people who wanted to know how to join the Disabilities Caucus, and you can join at CADEM.org. So please do that. We'd love to have you. Let's keep fighting for equitable access.
Thank you, Jennifer. And then, Stephen, I'm going to go to you for the last question. So basically, we have been leading up to this question. United Nations has talked about the theme this year, leadership in disability activism, and how we get people in leadership roles. So how do we as a party get more disabled Democrats to win local and state elected office? What are we doing, and what can we do better?
So I think part of it, if we take a step back and how we get Democrats into leadership, we always talk about building a bench as if people just appear one day and want to run for office. And while that's true, and things like PTA boards and people who speak at public comment is great, also elevating people into the areas where able-bodied individuals and Republicans have lived forever, and that is our commissions, our county commissions, our advisory groups, and elevating people into those groups. That's how I got started. I got asked as a 17-year-old to join an advisory group, and I'm like, I have no idea what that means. And here, a little over 10 years later, I'm in these leadership roles, right? So taking that step to elevate those voices and really believe, as many of us know, city councils, neighborhood councils, board of supervisors often are begging people to apply for appointment to their commissions. And so being that person to reach out to your friends with disability and say, hey, even if you're not an expert in this area, apply. Supervisor so-and-so who we helped get elected will get you in there. And that way you can learn. And those are the people that then you can run. right? I definitely encourage everybody to run, everybody to explore it, but that helps so much to already have a foot into some area of government. And as somebody who works in county government now on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, let me tell you, government is changing. So just know that you can come work in the government sector and look at that and look at whether it's the commissions, the councils, running for office, or working for government. Those are great opportunities to move people with disabilities into leadership. And often those should be Democrats, right? And we have a story to tell to a disabled community on why our party is the pro party for people with disabilities. And I can't stress it enough that we can't lose that message, that it's our party. We're your party. We fight for your issues. We want to know your issues. And I know it's tempting to go to decline to state or some other bad options, but we're the party, and we want you here at every level.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, because we are, the only other major party in this country is not helping out in these issues at all, and they are actively working against it. And, I tell people that all the time. It's like, if you want to fight back against falling back, this is the party you got to get involved in. So thank you to Sasha, thank you to Jennifer, thank you to Stephen, thank you to Assemblymember Ting for coming on. I appreciate all the words of wisdom that you've had. Just tell everybody in the chat, we've put it a couple times, the caucus, to join the caucus. And then also please consider making a contribution to the CADEM Future Leaders Internship Program. Our California Democratic Party paid internship program. That's right, paid internship. And there should be a link in the chat in just a minute. I do want to thank our ASL interpreters, Keelan and Denise. I want to thank Anthony on CART, Kat, our wonderful tech wizard, and Vincent Jones and India Thomas, who have been integral in setting this up. Vincent and India are just absolutely indispensable. They are really the backbone, them and other folks like them are the backbone of what this party is doing and really keeping us together. So thank you to both of them. And thank you to all of you who have come to watch this. Tomorrow is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. So please celebrate and be proud of who you are. Shine your disability pride, post it on social media, tag CADEM wherever you can, on Twitter, on Instagram. And, we're here for you guys. Like Stephen said, this is your party. So please contact us, reach out, get involved, and happy Disabilities Day to all of you. Thank you.